us, we got a little bit more work done on this little SCX Wraith. Now, again, this is a 1.9 converted Wraith, and those are nothing new, but this is just a little bit different way of doing it. This is basically an SCX10 underneath of a Wraith cage that I've bolted on. In the first video, I mentioned how I was wanting to pay specific attention to making sure that this thing was easy to work on. Now, the Axial Yeti has that flip top, and that is something that I wanted to emulate with this little car here. And I got that handled pretty simple. In the rear, I was able to make one simple mount out of some steel that I had here in the shop. Now, I used some steel and a sheet metal brake that I have here, but I know not everybody will have that. However, you could use some simple, thin aluminum angle that you can get from Home Depot. It's a very small, simple piece that goes in the back there. 2 pieces of angle could really knock this thing out super quick. If that's something you guys are interested in, I'll draw up a template in CAD for you, post it on my website, harleydesigns.com, and you guys can be able to download it, trace it onto the pieces that you want, and cut it out yourself with just some super basic hand tools. In the front, I used the standard SCX10 body post setup to allow to attach the very front of that body. So pull 2 body clips, and then the whole thing comes right up. That's all there is to it. The only thing that I'm going to have to pay attention to is that wherever I place all of the components that I will need in here, battery, ESC, receiver, all of those things, they need to be able to clear this cage as it goes up and down. So I'll have to pay close attention to the width of the inside of these frame rails per se on the original Wraith cage. Now, the Wraith cage didn't just bolt on after making that bracket. I did have to do a couple of things. Now, again, since I wanted to have this flip top ability, I used the stock SCX10 shock hoops. Now, that was so that I don't ever have to mess with the shocks at all when I want to raise or lower this cage. So I had to do some clearancing on the Wraith chassis to make sure that I got those old shock mounts and things like that out of the way. Because as you can imagine, if you set the Wraith chassis on top of an SCX10 chassis, some things are going to interfere. In the rear, I simply made one cut to remove the very outside bar from the chassis. Now, I took some pictures of this while I was doing it, just to show you guys a little bit of an example. Now, I made one cut up towards the front side of the wheel well, and then the rear side just unscrewed. Simple deal there. What I did leave was the 2 inside rails of the Wraith chassis. Pretty simple little modification. In the rear, the shock hoops are on the belt line of this chassis. Now, I simply removed that piece there that holds all of the shock mounts and everything like that. You can actually just completely remove that if you wanted. What I did is I cut the horseshoe or the little L-shaped shock mounts off, and then I put back in the bar that goes across right behind the driver and passenger seat area, just for some extra stiffness, even though this chassis is basically just the body now. It doesn't really function as the chassis itself. So that was all the modification that was needed in the rear. Again, super simple. Don't get overwhelmed at all. This is your first time working with any sort of fabrication or anything. It's the easiest kind. It's just cutting stuff away. Now, on the sides here, normally there's a hoop that comes down around the side of the chassis, and that's where the stock Wraith skid plate bolts into. That's not needed anymore. I just cut those off just to gain a little bit more clearance on the underside of the cage there, since they stuck on the outside of the SCX10 chassis. Not much you guys will have to worry about when doing that. One last cut was needed to be made. That was right here. There's a down bar that comes from the middle of the hood, and I basically cut the frame rails off right at that point. Now, that was so that there was no interference with those stock front shock towers. That's it though. 3 or 4 cuts on each side, and you're really pretty much done. That mount in the rear, if you had the template, you could probably get it done in less than 20 minutes total for both sides. And then everything pretty much just bolts into place. It's pretty much that easy. Now from there, again, I'm using a Proline Wraith body. Now, this body's been around for quite a while. It's their Jeep JK Rubicon. But one thing with using that is it's got some pretty defined wheel wells. So again, you know, it's got a front wheel well and a rear wheel well. Now a stock Wraith does have a rear wheel well, but the front is pretty open because it's just got kind of a flat hood line. There's some advantages to that over this little setup here. With this setup, I needed to match the wheelbase of this car to fit inside of those pretty closely, otherwise it would have looked off. And it also would no longer have been Class 2 SORCA legal because you have to fit within the wheelbase of the body within plus or minus like a ½ inch or so. But if you used a Wraith hood, you could kind of push that wherever you needed to, and you could actually cheat a little bit more wheelbase into it or whatnot. The reason I mention that is if you have a stock SCX10 or just an SCX10 with the stock wheelbase, no matter what links you have on it, you could do this conversion and simply by mounting the body on, then you're done. This one, I had to mess around with some link lengths a little bit. What this one is this one's about 11 3/4 inches long, which is just a little bit shorter than say like an SCX10 deadbolt or an SCX10 G6 kit. If you were using either of those two kits, this would still probably look okay. I've got it pretty well set, so this rear one comes out to be exactly the same as that G6 or deadbolt rear wheelbase. The front is where I adjusted it a little bit. Now, even with this one, I didn't actually make any of these links. They're all off-the-shelf links. The uppers are the stock length links for a G6 or deadbolt kit. The lowers are Traxxas push rods, actually. I just grabbed a hold of my bucket of links, basically, that I have sitting around that are random, and just mocked some things up. And the shorter 70-75 aluminum push rods fit in the front just fine. They're 102 millimeters long. But again, stock deadbolt or G6 links will work in the rear. So that's where we're at for right now. I've got stock axial SCX10 axles under it for the moment. And right now I threw on the wheels and tires from my Mattzilla Ultra 4 rig. However, these will not be staying. These are just kind of for mock-up for the moment. These will get back on that Mattzilla rig. I did order some wheels today. I ordered the new Vanquish 8-hole shooter wheels. Really simple, kind of classic design. Just thought I'd throw something on this. I'm kind of going with a more subtle look on this build than I have with a lot of mine in the past. This one, just going to go pretty subdued, some standard classic style silver wheels with a black ring. This body will probably get painted black, although I probably will do some sort of Freaky Skins wrap on the hood or doors or something like that, because I just really can't help it but to do something along those lines. Next is going to be electronics. I'm going to go with a brushed setup in here since this is basically going to be a crawling type rig. From there, I'll start working on some of the details. Making sure the electronics fit up front and everything clears this body is going to be the most important part. Once I've got the electronics in there, I'm sorted with all of that, that's when I'll start working on some interior things. Now, I did have a stock Wraith interior that I tried to fit. Now, with this setup, it actually wouldn't sit all the way down, so this isn't going to just drop in. That would have been just too easy. If I moved the Wraith cage back a little ways, I probably could have got it to fit much easier, but I really did like the way that this body fit with the frame rails front to rear. I don't have really any overhang, and everything fits just about right with the axles and all that. So you win some, you lose some, and for me, for the first shot on this little build, I'll take it how it is. I'll probably work with some sort of basic custom interior just to kind of play around. You could modify a stock Wraith interior to work with either some spacers or some trimming for the transmission. It really wouldn't be that involved, and in the end, it would be pretty easy. That's going to be it for this update. This little project's coming together pretty quick and easy. I think it's something that just about any of you guys could probably handle, even if it was your very first time trying to do any sort of custom work at all with an RC car. In general, something that I think will be a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to getting it out on the rocks when it's all said and done. Hopefully I'll have some more updates coming this weekend on it, and check back on the channel. We'll see what we have. We'll see you guys next time.